Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another special edition of Fourth and Gold right here at Beyond the Big Ten. You can follow us at Beyond the Big Ten wherever you get your socials, IG, Twitter, and thank you for checking us out right here on YouTube. My name is Joey Christopoulos. Let's bring in our host of Fourth and Gold. He is CBS Network's very own. That other pregame show, it is Brock Vereen. What is up, Brock?
Doing great. The chaos that is college football has become a 365-day reality show, and whether you like it or not, that's the current state of things, so you may as well try to enjoy it.
And we're going to try and pick and parcel as best as we can in the next 15 to 20 minutes here on this very special episode. We wanted to come back on and do a CFP episode. We are going to preview a little bit of some Gophers news, obviously, Bowling Green. We're going to talk a little Athan Kaliakmanis. But first, we got to talk about the CFP Final Four. Brock, I'm just going to open up the floor to you, man. I just want to get your initial reaction on the Final Four. Do you agree with it? Maybe we'll just go from there.
I don't. I don't, and I'm happy that this is not the last year that any kind of committee will have input, but this is the last year that they will have such significant input, right? Of course, there will be discussion about who the 12th and 11th team are in the playoff going forward, and should the 13th and 14th team have gotten, etc. But in regards to this scale, what a swan song by the committee. I fundamentally disagree with the best four teams get in. I'm a believer that the four most deserving teams get in. And the reason is because when we say the best four teams, we act like that's an objective thing. Unless all the top 10 teams have played one another, it's not some objective fact-based thing. We present it like it's a fact-based thing. It's not. It's entirely opinion. Going into Oregon, Washington, Pac-12 championship, despite Washington beating Oregon, everyone thought Oregon was going to win that game. And we were wrong, right? How many people thought that Georgia was going to beat Alabama? Fewer than thought that Washington was going to beat Oregon. But still, we were wrong in two of the championships. So it's such a joke that a team goes undefeated in their conference, and while... Okay, you know what? Let's go to the injury thing, because that's what Boo Corrigan said their main thing was. Jordan Travis is hurt, therefore we don't think they can keep playing at a high level. He was hurt weeks ago, so you should have bumped them down then. You can't play that card after they put up the best defensive performance maybe in the entire college football season, right? Louisville is a high-powered offense, one of the highest-powered offenses in college football to anyone who was paying attention. And look at what Florida State's defense did. If their offense got so much worse, by saying that, you're also saying their defense got that much better, because things balance out that way. It's such a joke. And now my question is, and I'd love for you to answer it, who is the bigger villain now, Alabama or Michigan? We have to root for one of them.
Yeah, they got to play each other, that's for sure. And judging by the room in Michigan when they found out that Alabama was going to be their opponent, I got a nice little chuckle out of that one. In terms of when we talk about villains, they clutched their pearls. They were like, "Oh God," and heaved into a bag. I think the biggest word that you said in your fantastic response was the word teams, right? Team. So when we're talking about the committee right now, we're talking about Jordan Travis taking the one player, and let's be honest, it's the quarterback position. It does open itself up for a lot of criticism because of the concept of, well, if we're not going to get a great rating because there's not going to be points scored, that isn't the kind of football that we want to put onto the national stage or on a CFP stage, so they're automatically out. I just have a lot of questions for you, because this is just an interesting... I mean, this has changed chairs several times over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, we had Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State's out. Georgia was at number one. Now, all of a sudden, Georgia is out completely. And then you have the issue of FSU. So when it comes down to the committee, I mean, I guess my big question for you is, did they lean too much on an eye test or a who's not and who's hot and who's not a little bit, instead of looking at the body of the work of the whole season? Like, how how do you balance that out when you're trying to get a full body of work, but when it really comes down to either your championship game or who's healthy and who's not? That's the part that I can't quite figure out.
Joey, what it comes down to is they were never gonna put Florida State in. If Alabama had lost an earlier game and they had 2 losses and they went to beat Georgia, they were gonna put Georgia in over Florida State. Unfortunately, there's nowhere they're gonna put Florida State in. And it's so funny, the hypocrisy, because who was the higher ranked team when Ohio State played Michigan, right? They were wrong about that one, but all of a sudden the eye test is, and like they proved that their eye is not accurate, and they just kept relying on it. It's so unfair that you can win 13 games. And you know what? I want to shout out to Booger McFarland, because for whatever reason, the 3 other guys on the panel were just completely ignorant to the point he was trying to make in regards to, you don't have to win pretty. And that circles it around to your question, is they went for the prettiest wins instead of did you win or did you not. No one said it has to be pretty. Remember, was it Alabama LSU, that championship like in 2010? It was like 9-6 or something like that. They still won a championship, and they still got a ring for it because they won. So I am so upset that a team goes 13-0, kicks the crap out of LSU to start the season, goes into Tuscaloosa and beats Alabama by, I'm sorry. And then Alabama loses by 2 possessions to another team at home, and even still, and then Florida State beats another SEC team in Florida, and all of those things still end up with Alabama jumping Florida State. And all I know is if Alabama does beat Michigan, the entire world will be a Washington fan, or the entire world will be a Texas fan. And it's just such an unfair thing for everyone in Tallahassee.
And that's the problem, right? Is that it does come off like a beauty pageant for ratings, right? Like Texas puts up a huge number, and we talk about style points and we talk about pretty wins. And Brock, you're from the defensive side of the ball. I bet if you went to any defensive lineman or any linebacker or any D-back and ask, was it a pretty win holding Louisville to 6 points, they would say damn right. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so what are we talking about when we're talking about style? We're talking about an entertainment factor. Yeah, and it's unfortunately that's bleeding into the concept of competition. And if we really want to talk about, the best teams rising to the surface, then no offense, like Michigan should have played Ohio State again in the Big Ten championship and not Iowa, right? We probably would have gotten a clearer picture in our own backyard, but because we have these 2 divisions and it's the way that it works, you know what I mean? Michigan goes out there and can just win 17-0. Was that a pretty win? Was that stylish? I mean, so it's all in this different kind of grading scale. And all of a sudden you have Texas and Alabama jumping in, and all of a sudden you got FSU and you got Georgia jumping out. My question for you, we're kind of burying the lead. Who was your top 4?
My top 4 would have been Michigan 1, Washington 2, Texas 3, Florida State 4.
Florida State 4. Okay. So you are the no SEC camp, which I'm seeing a lot of right now.
Yeah. And
yeah, that's unbelievable.
The whole SEC bias thing, I don't actually see that playing into this one. There are plenty of previous years where you could argue that was at the crux of the decision. If Alabama was, I guess the Big 12 didn't have too many contenders, but let's say that Alabama was Baylor this year, and they were wearing green and yellow uniforms. I still think they take Baylor in that way if they have the same players as Alabama, right? It wasn't pro Bama. It was anti Florida State. Is a much cleaner way of what I'm saying. And yeah, to your point of we always say defense wins championships, but apparently beautiful defense isn't enough to get in now. I would have had a non-SEC championship. The Pac-12 was far and away the best conference this year. I wouldn't even have the SEC as the second best conference this year. I'd have them third probably. But it is what it is, and it's hindsight. And now everyone just has to root against, not necessarily Bama. And really quickly, it also stinks for the Bama players that they're the villains when they didn't ask to be, right? Because from their perspective, we won the SEC championship. We came out and fought. The entire world is going to be against them in the Michigan game, which is crazy to think about. And the entire world is going to be against them if they beat Michigan and go to the championship. And maybe they're comfortable in that role, but they better get used to it because it's not them that they're booing. It's Boo Corrigan and the committee that they'll be booing.
Is it fair to ask the question, is this Washington's national championship to lose? Or do you think it's totally up in the air? It's as wide open as any other year?
I tell you what, Washington, I feel, will handle Texas not easily, but I see a 2-possession win. Washington matches up so much better against Alabama than Michigan. I don't see Michigan necessarily being able to put up a ton of points against Washington, but this Washington defense, I wouldn't call them susceptible to the run. I would say the closest thing that they've played recently was the Oregon State game. And that entire first half, Oregon State was giving them hell on the ground. Now, they obviously shorted up and won the game in the second half, but do they make those adjustments? Do the adjustments they make work as well against Michigan? I don't know. And Michigan defensively, the best DB room in college football, going up against Michael Penix and those receivers. I would take the Michigan DBs, giving the Washington wide receivers the toughest game that they faced all year. So if I have to put it that way, yeah, I'm going to say it's Washington's to lose.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. You know, the Michigan-Alabama victor also is going to have, I think, a great shot at it too as well. But again, I don't know. There's a situation where we might not learn a lot from that game, where it might just be a really close, kind of ugly, kind of up and down, a little choppy game. Because I think both defenses are going to come out and play in that game for sure, so it'll be interesting to see. I think my final one for you, and then we're going to move over to transfer portal. We're going to talk a little Gophers football really quick. We're going to do it every year until the end of time. Are you an 8-team CFP guy? I mean, do you like it as the 4 right now? There's two sides of the coin on that one. First of all, when there is a top 4, there's a 4-team playoff. Tons of conversation. There are people that are up in arms about it, and there are people that are just like Alabama fans. I can't believe we just snuck in, or like Texas. I can't believe we're working this hard along. We're finally in the 4. But also, are they getting it right? So does it lend itself closer to one day us just going to an 8-team, or are you worried about the worms coming out of the can on that one? And by the next time we got 8-team, 16-team, 24-team, so on and so forth, where would you probably land on that one?
Yeah. I would say why I feel it'll stop at this current expanded playoff, or that not current, but this upcoming year's expanded playoff is the argument of who gets left out in the top 4 versus who gets left out of a top 12. It just won't be as strong, right? Because it will be like there won't be 12 undefeated teams. There won't be 12 one-loss teams. Now we're dealing with 2 lost teams. Yep. So I feel no one will be up in arms about a 2-loss team and say, hey, you had your opportunities, right? Right now we're dealing with undefeated teams. Power 5 teams not making it in. So will there be uproar always, because there's always going to be the first 2 out, but the noise won't be as loud because there'll be 2 lost teams.
Yeah, it'll be a little diluted, right? But it'll help for smaller schools, the James Madisons of the world. You know what I mean?
There
to
you
be
go.
up in arms about possibly not making that, not making that top 12, right? Yeah, no, and I think honestly, I think college football likes the conversation for sure. And they clearly like the ratings too as well, just kind of based on my opinion of how they ended up at the top with their Final 4. Let's move it on over to the transfer portal. Man, keep your phone on refresh because people are hopping in that portal left and right. A lot of news going on in the Big Ten. Let's just start right here on 4th and Gold here in Gopher Nation. Were you a little bit surprised Athan Kaliakmanis entered the transfer portal? And am I allowed to say the name that no one else seems to want to say? Max Prosper. Am I allowed to say that name right now? Where do you land on that? Do you think that the Gophers program started looking around and this sort of inspired Athan to probably go somewhere else? Where do you land on Athan Kaliakmanis leaving the Gopher program?
I'd imagine the conversation wasn't Athan, you should get in the portal. It was Athan, we're gonna bring in a couple quarterbacks for you to compete with. I personally don't think that the Gophers are done. I feel they look to add another quarterback in the portal because Brosmer is a grad transfer. I know he's played 4 years at New Hampshire. So there will at least be one freshman in this class. I would see them finding another vet that they could bring in in case they need to bridge between Brosmer and whoever the incoming freshman is. I would imagine the conversation was, Athan, it'll be an uphill battle. If you want to sit here and go back and earn that spot, we would love to keep you here. If you feel that there are greener pastures, and even if you won out in camp, people wouldn't be excited about it, I could understand that too. Because say Athan was the best quarterback in training camp. He goes out there and has a bad game week 2, week 3. Now he's back where he started, right? So it's unfortunate. I didn't want them to give up on him. I wanted them to bring in plenty of people to compete with him, but I didn't want them to give up on him. But I understand completely why Athan would think, even if I win out this competition, I'm never gonna win back this fan base until I throw for 500 yards and 0 interceptions. So more power to him. I would imagine if he goes to another Power 5 school, it'll be a competition aspect. But if he goes to a MAC school, a Mountain West school, I could absolutely see him being a day one starter if he has a good spring and a good camp.
That's a great point. I definitely immediately kind of thought of something along the lines of the MAC, right? And is it fair, from the player's perspective, Brock, is it fair that from Athan's perspective, he's still only 20 years old, and we talk about a lot of different quarterbacks entering the portal right now. That's still pretty much on the young side. And is it possible that maybe it's an opportunity for him to kind of be wooed again, and to have a program come up and be like, hey, man, and wrap his arm around him and be like, hey, man, you're our guy. From a player's perspective, does that have a certain sense of appeal for a lot of these players that enter the portal?
100%. It's for whatever reason, my welcome has been worn out at the place I'm currently at. Let's start over this process. And sometimes you just want to be somewhere that you're wanted. And that's not necessarily just being wanted by your teammates, being wanted by your coaches, being wanted by the school and the city that you play for. That team and those coaches always had his back, but we don't know what it's like going to class every day. And I've been on 3-win football teams, and there are moments where you're just like, God, I wish things were going so much better. To be the quarterback on a team that's not living up to expectation is a whole different beast. Good for him for doing what's best for him. I don't feel we've heard his name for the last time.
And then, moving over, I feel like that there's a similar situation going on with Kyle McCord entering the transfer portal at Ohio State, where I think one way or the other, I think Ohio State probably made it known in not so many words that we can probably do better at the position. Or they were looking to upgrade or bring in some type of competition. He's going to be moving on. Other Big Ten news, Brendan Sorsby and what looks like the entire offensive line for Indiana is going to be moving on. Before we get out of here, what are a couple of other names that, I don't know, either surprised you or intrigued you that have entered the transfer portal in the last 48, 72 hours? Because there's been a lot of names.
2, one non-Gopher, one Gopher. The one that is not a Gopher is Dylan Gabriel out of Oklahoma. I thought they had a good thing going. In Brent Venable's second year, they were a top team for a while. Yeah, they had some disappointing losses, but by all means, the trajectory of Oklahoma football is going up. And I'm very shocked because he wasn't the problem, and nobody there thought that he was the problem. No one was complaining, oh, we'd be so much better if Dylan Gabriel wasn't our quarterback. That's really shocking. I can't imagine they pushed him out. So maybe he has some sights set on where he wants to go. His name, he's not the most talented quarterback in the portal, but he's the one I'm most intrigued to see where he lands because it just does not add up. From a running back position, Gopher, Zach Evans entering the portal is shocking. Of course, Darius Taylor announcing that he was going to come back a couple days after Zach Evans entered. Maybe that has something to do with it. You look at Bucky Irving, he wasn't buried on the Minnesota depth chart 2 years ago, but he wasn't going to be RB1 the next year when he knew that Muhammad Ibrahim was going to come back. Transferred to Oregon, was their starting running back. Oregon was a dang good football team this year and last. So Zach Evans will absolutely be RB1 wherever he goes. But it was surprising because Minnesota wants to run the football. So their top 3 running backs are getting starters carries. Like Jordan Newbin had more carries than probably most starting running backs who started for all 13 games on all 12 games at most college schools. So that was surprising, but I get it. Hey, I put some good tape out there. I can go be RB1 and probably get a little NIL money as well. So good for him for doing what's best for him, but Dylan Gabriel and Zach Evans were the 2 most surprising for me.
Yeah, and there's going to be more names to come in, obviously the days, weeks throughout the rest of the bowl season, and afterwards, and obviously we're going to hit the recruiting cycle, and it's going to be exciting. I mean, there's going to be a lot of, it just changes everything now, like every single year. I mean, it's not just about recruiting high school freshmen and then redshirting them every single year. It's about being ready-made players that you can plug and play and completely reshape your offense or your defense at a moment's notice. It's definitely changed college football. Before we get out of here, no Athan. I'm not sure. I mean, we got weeks to go before we, with Darius Taylor. But, just a quick little preview of the bowl game. Bowling Green, I personally don't know a ton about. Give us a little bit of a preview. Does Minnesota have a good shot at coming out with a win, even if it isn't without Athan Kaliakmanis under center?
Well, it's a question of quarterback, of course, because Athan Kaliakmanis is gone. Drew Vioto also transferred out, and we also mentioned running back Zach Evans. So for the bowl game, there's only 2 quarterbacks currently on their roster because Max Brosmer, of course. So there's 3 on the roster. Max Brosmer's not going to play in the bowl game. So there's 2 who they could play with, which is Cole Kramer, who I expect to be the starter, and quarterback Max Shikenjansky, who, to my knowledge, has not taken any snap in any game yet. So
I was going to make you say that last name. I was not going to say that last name.
Yeah. So Kramer has had like some wildcat package stuff. He's completed some passes. He'll go out there for really an audition. Hey, let's see if you can compete with Max Brosmer going into spring. So it'd be Cole Kramer. Running backs on roster: Jordan Newbin, Cortez LeGrant, and Darius Taylor. I feel if you've been battling injuries all year, just sit out the bowl game. You're not going to go out there and make something worse against Bowling Green. Let's be honest. It's just not worth it. So I'll expect to see a combination of those 2 quarterbacks and Newbin and LeGrant. At running back, 4 of 5 of their offensive linemen will return next year. So all 5 of them will be available for the game, but just looking ahead, I'm excited to see how those 4 returners look. Plenty of D linemen coming back. Wide receiver Daniel Jackson announced he's coming back. Linebacker room will be great. Lindenberg, Devin Williams, and Mavic Baranowski all coming back next year. Jack Henderson and Craig McDonald coming back next year. Tyler Newbin will have to be replaced, but they have tons of experience in Darius Green and Aiden Gooseby. Coleman Bryson rotated in quite a bit toward the end of the year as well. Justin Wally. If you asked me freshman and sophomore year, I would have thought he'd be a 3-and-done guy. This year didn't go the way that he expected. I would expect him to be back. And as far as Bowling Green before next year, starting quarterback Connor Bazelak played at Mizzou as a freshman, played at Indiana before transferring to Bowling Green. And the fact remains, Bowling Green and any MAC team is a bunch of Midwest kids who wish they got offered by Big Ten schools. So this isn't going to be their Super Bowl because they're all. I mean, they played Michigan earlier this year, but it's going to be a bunch of kids who won't be intimidated by a Big Ten team. They're familiar with Big Ten teams, and quite honestly, for the amount of times MAC players ball out and transfer to Big Ten schools, most of these rosters have a ton of former Big Ten players as well. So there's no intimidation advantage. Bowling Green should travel decently well, not too far of a drive from Ohio to Detroit. It should be fun, and let's also remember the 2021 season. Bowling Green upset Minnesota at home in what would have been a 10-win season, so that should be on the mind of Fleck and the Gophers as well, because as it stands right here, that would be considered PJ Fleck's worst loss as the head coach of Minnesota. So plenty to play for, despite what most would consider a disappointing year.
This was an episode of Fourth and Gold right here at Beyond the Big Ten. Follow us at Beyond the Big Ten wherever you get your socials, Instagram, Twitter. Go check us out. Thank you so much for watching us on YouTube or listening to us wherever you get your podcast. If you enjoy the show, please tell a friend. Just a quick programming note, if you will. We are going to take the next week or so off, like a lot of different shows with college football, but we are going to come back to recap the bowl game of Minnesota Gophers versus Bowling Green when that happens, so make sure you come back and check that out. And we're going to have plenty of excellent college football offseason chatter leading up to the NFL draft, into the recruiting, all that good kinds of stuff, so make sure you come back and check us out around then. My name is Joey Christopoulos with our host, Minnesota Gopher great, Brock Vereen. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Brock. Thank you. Great to see you as always. Everyone be well, be safe. Please be good to each other during this holiday season. We will be back soon. And we'll see who's on the team as we move along here throughout the transfer portal. Thank you so much for tuning in.